Hello everyone, welcome to my channel. My name is Bethany and today I'm going to share all about my celiac disease symptoms and diagnosis story. I just recently got diagnosed at the age of 25. I'm 26 now. Part of that reason I think my diagnosis took so long is because I think my symptoms were very misunderstood and overlooked, and that's a huge part of why I wanted to share my story, because I know when I was watching these types of videos, I didn't see a lot of people experiencing the same kinds of symptoms I was experiencing, which now I know that there are so many different symptoms associated with celiac disease and not everyone experiences the same symptoms. So if you clicked on this video, you probably already have a basic understanding of what celiac disease is, but if you don't, I'll give a brief explanation. So celiac disease is an autoimmune disease that attacks your small intestine every time you eat anything with even the smallest amount of gluten. The villi in your small intestine that get worn down if you have celiac disease contain enzymes that help you digest food, and they are also responsible for absorbing nutrients in your food that you eat. So because of this, it's really common to develop food intolerances if you are lacking those enzymes, or you may become malnourished or deficient in certain vitamins if you aren't able to absorb nutrients from the food that you're eating. And the vitamin deficiencies are where a lot of the symptoms stem from. So my main symptoms are joint pain. My other symptoms are eczema, anemia, lactose intolerance, which I started developing in my 20s, and Hashimoto's and hypothyroidism. So I've always had joint pain ever since I can remember. I always mentioned these symptoms of joint pain to my doctor growing up, and every time I brought it up to my doctor, she would always just say that what I was experiencing was just growing pains. I also had a lot of issues with getting lightheaded. I would pass out a lot. I even had doctor's appointments where I got tests run because I was having heart palpitations, and I just kept having these doctor's appointments that always resulted in zero answers, and the doctor would always tell me that everything is normal. So I got into my 20s and I felt like my joint pain was just getting worse. Usually I got joint pain in my knees, but I would get pain in every single joint in my body. I had it in my knees, my ankles, my elbows, my wrists, my fingers, my toes, just everywhere. And it was like a severe, excruciating, burning, dull ache. So I went to that same doctor again and I was like, okay, I'm in my 20s. I don't think I'm growing anymore. Like, what is going on? And she was basically like, well, technically you're still growing until the age of 25. You know, your bones are still developing, and basically told me that it was still growing pains, which was a bunch of baloney to me. So shortly after that, I moved to a different city after I graduated college, and I found a new doctor to continue this journey of figuring out why in the world I was getting all of this joint pain for my whole life. So at that point, I was taking Tylenol pretty regularly, and around this time I had also started to notice that I thought I was starting to develop a lactose intolerance. So I also brought that up to this doctor, as well as the joint pain. And with the lactose intolerance, she just kind of shrugged that off as normal and unrelated to the joint pain, and basically just told me to keep eating dairy-free if that was working for me. So she ran all these blood tests on me. She was pretty sure that I had some sort of autoimmune disease going on, which she tested me for basically every autoimmune disease except for celiac disease. She was pretty sure that I had rheumatoid arthritis. I know I was tested for rheumatoid arthritis and lupus and autoimmune diseases along those lines, which all came back negative. So she continued to run more specific tests for rheumatoid arthritis, which all kept coming back negative. I even asked to get my thyroid checked because my mom had thyroid issues and she had just gotten her thyroid removed. So I knew that that was something that ran in my family, and I wanted to get that checked as well, which that also came back normal. The levels were slightly abnormal, but not concerning enough to do anything about it. So after all these tests came back normal, that doctor basically gave up on me and told me that the joint pain that I was experiencing was probably just normal and that I should just keep taking Tylenol. But even with all the blood work that I had done, my inflammation levels were really high. So I knew that there was something going on in my body, and I knew I wasn't completely crazy. Like, there had to be something that was going on. So after that, I moved again to another city for different reasons, not just because I needed to find another doctor. But I ended up moving again, and this time I wanted to seek out a holistic doctor. Since I wasn't getting any answers from these other doctors, I wanted a fresh perspective. And first of all, I highly recommend getting a holistic doctor's opinion if there's anything that you're dealing with that a conventional doctor just isn't able to figure out. So at my first appointment with this new doctor, she ran lots of tests and blood work, and I found out first that I had SIBO, which is a whole other story, and that I was also so deficient in vitamins B12, D, and zinc, so much that I was actually depleted in these. Like, she was wondering how I was even able to function during the day. So at my follow-up appointment, my doctor actually wanted me to get a B12 injection since my levels were just so dangerously low, which just from that one injection, I immediately felt like I had just chugged 12 cups of coffee. I felt like I had so much energy that I had never had before. And because of the B12 deficiency, I was also anemic, and because of the vitamin D deficiency, it had affected my thyroid. So I had developed Hashimoto's and hypothyroidism because my thyroid was not getting the amount of vitamin D that it needed. So I immediately started taking supplements for all the deficiencies, as well as supplements and a low FODMAP diet to treat the SIBO that I had, which cuts out a lot of different foods, including gluten. I started all of this in November, all the way through Thanksgiving and Christmas, which was just a really awful time to be on a really strict diet, but we do what we gotta do to feel better, right? So at that follow-up appointment, my doctor was pretty alarmed by my deficiencies and just all my symptoms adding up. So she wanted to run a celiac panel just to rule it out before I started the low FODMAP diet, since that cuts out gluten and you have to be consuming gluten to have accurate results when you get tested for celiac disease. So during the week of Thanksgiving is when I checked my portal to check my results for all that blood work that came back, and I was literally so shocked when all of my results came back positive for celiac disease. I was so surprised and just kind of frustrated and like really confused. I actually cried when I looked at those results because, I mean, it's Thanksgiving week. I was on this really strict diet and I couldn't eat all the carbs and desserts that everybody else was eating, and I was just thinking about how if I'm positive for celiac disease, how that's going to change and affect the rest of my life with what foods I can eat and social situations, where I can and can't eat out at restaurants. It just affects everything. When my doctor initially told me that she was gonna test me for celiac disease, I was honestly thinking like, oh, okay, like that's probably gonna come back negative. Like, I've never experienced any kind of like digestion symptoms from eating gluten. Like, occasionally, I guess if I eat like a huge amount of pasta, I would get a little bit bloated, but I never had like any stomach pain or diarrhea or anything from eating gluten. But the more I looked into celiac disease and the symptoms, I was actually shocked. Like, I had heard of celiac before and I knew people that had it, and I thought I understood what it was and what the symptoms were, but I had no idea. I mean, I thought that if you had celiac disease, you had stomach symptoms, and I did not. My symptoms were joint pain, and they were not immediate. So I notice now that when I eat gluten, I don't get symptoms until like 2 days later, and then they last for like 2 weeks. So they are not immediate at all, which made it really hard to figure out that gluten was actually my issue. But everything started adding up, and the more that I learned about celiac disease, it all started making more sense. And I was actually starting to wonder why my previous doctors never put my symptoms together and never tested me for celiac disease. So eventually I got past the emotional and overwhelming shock of finding out that I have a pretty serious autoimmune disease that I've had my entire life. And I started to come to terms with it and actually started to see it as more of a blessing now that I have answers as to what has been going on and causing me all of this pain my whole life. I was tired all the time. I had eczema that never went away. I had excruciating joint pain all over my body, and I was lightheaded all the time. So I was actually really happy to find out what was making me feel so horrible all the time and have a way to fix it and finally feel better. And actually, when I was able to finally go off of the low FODMAP diet because of the SIBO, it didn't seem as bad to just continue eating gluten-free because I was able to reintroduce all of these other foods. So the blood test for celiac disease does not give you the final diagnosis, so I had to go see a gastroenterologist to get an endoscopy done, which is a biopsy of the small intestine to check for damage to the villi in your small intestine, which is what the antibodies attack when you have celiac disease. And to no surprise, that all came back positive. So now I've been eating gluten-free and I've been on supplements for almost a year now, and I have noticed such a huge difference. I feel so much better. I don't get joint pain anymore unless I have been cross-contaminated. And all of my eczema has gone away. I don't get lightheaded anymore. My thyroid levels are back in a normal range, and I just have so much more energy. So that is my celiac disease story. I hope you found it helpful if you're going through the same thing. And just remember, you are not alone and it does get better. Let me know if you have any questions in the comments below, and give this video a like and subscribe if you want to see more content on celiac disease and gluten-free eating. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in my next video.